Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are so happy to have you here to share your stories and to help us make a difference and to help us impact the state of lack of broadband access in the US today. We thought it would be very appropriate to start off today with two educators, two people working in the area where they really need broadband access to tell their story. So I will pass it over to Alex.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Alex Steiner, and I'm an instructional coach from the Show Low Unified School District. I'm up in the White Mountains of Arizona. It's absolutely beautiful here. And I actually started the year as an instructional coach, as a data coach, and I started our online, we called it WMI White Mountain Institute, the K-5 online program. So I really love technology, but just to give you a little background where we are, on the 4th of July, when everybody comes up here, cell phones don't work because we have maxed out our infrastructure, our data, our everything that's going on. You can call somebody, but you don't have data going on. Just to give you like a background, right? When we get overpopulated up here, we lack all of those towers to be able to handle the population. I didn't make that connection when we were going to start this online process, if that makes any sense. So when we started the online, we had two options for families. We had an AOI, and what that is, it's where you are on a program like Edgenuity, or a program like Edmentum, and it's almost like a homeschooling program. They're on a computer and parents are supporting them with that. And then we also had another online option where kids could come in and out, and that was where we were recording teachers' lessons, and some were live lessons and some were recorded and posted later on in the day. And where I found where we started getting more and more stress on our system was when parents were having trouble watching those videos with their kids, being able to get on and watch the lessons with their students. I would get some really angry phone calls because they felt it was our fault. And in reality, it was actually the lack of infrastructure outside in our community. So I could watch the video at home. I'm not at home, from school, where our internet is heavier, right? Because we're K-12 and we have those connections. But some of our students who are like farther out, just to give you an idea, we're pretty spread out here in Show Low. Like you have the in town and then you have like out town, like little areas. The farther out you were from the in town, the harder it was for kids to be able to watch these lessons. And it was really difficult. And as that was happening, you have students starting to get more and more behind. You have students that gave up and they came back. We started in person August, I can't remember the date, but August 15th, somewhere around there, we started. So we had the option for in person. So it was a little bit hard for families who really didn't feel like that was the best place, but then ended up coming back in person because they just couldn't get the internet to work where they were at. So we still have pockets in our area that even if we gave somebody some type of Wi-Fi hotspot, they would not be able to use it at their home. They would have to come in town to use it. And so those are the things that we came up against. And so probably the biggest plus for us is that we were open. So we did give that opportunity to, have kids come in. The high school did a phenomenal job. They set up their library almost like mini pods. So if they weren't able to get internet, they could come in at the library in a mini pod, social distance, and really almost set it up like a mini high school. So to help with those problems. Unfortunately, at K-5 level, we didn't have room to put a pod. So it's very different there, right? And then K-5, the little guys need somebody sitting next to them all the time to do internet, do something like that. So that's, I would love to see for us up here in the White Mountains to be able to add to our infrastructure and really be able to give internet to everybody. My colleagues down on the reservation were telling me that Frontier, which is our internet, had run every line possible to connect because they were 100% online, and they still had issues and they couldn't get kids on because it just was so overloaded. Our infrastructure couldn't handle it. Is that kind of like, that's my bad. That's where we are. So
Alex, thank you so very much for sharing your story. And we'll definitely want to circle back with you. And also thank you. You're giving so much time and effort to help the students who aren't able to connect. And you know how important your job is right now. I know you do, because you must be really tired. But thank you just so much for sharing that story. So we have David here. David, I believe you're in Mexico, but you have been here too. So we'd love it for you to share your story.
Yes. Hi, good morning. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. And by the way, I think it's
Okay,
interesting.
great.
Alex had issues with Wi-Fi, and now you are too. So it just goes to show. But go ahead.
Yeah, so well, thank you so much for the invitation, Lisa. I really appreciate that. And hello to everybody here. Good morning. Thank you, for having me. Yes, my name is David Pena. I'm an American English teacher. I was, born and raised in New Jersey. A couple of years back, my family moved to Mexico City, and afterwards, like a couple of years later, we relocated to another state inside Mexico called Tlaxcala, which is like around 2.5 or 3 hours away from Mexico City. So my story basically is, I guess, very similar to all of you guys, teachers and educators. Certainly COVID has had to make us, move on to online teaching learning. And as for, the internet, well, definitely having a better infrastructure is always a good thing. I've had to move on to use both synchronous and asynchronous learning. Should anything happen, for example, if I am sharing my screen, whether with Zoom or Google Meet, and the video is just the video I'm sharing, whether it be like a TED-Ed video or something of that sort, is not sharing adequately, then what I basically do is I do have like a Google Classroom with them, or sometimes I have a WhatsApp group, depending who I'm teaching. So I just tell them, what, please, go to this link and just watch it on your phone for a moment and then come back with me. So I have had to kind of do like, many, hybrid models for myself, like in that way. And because of the sometimes low internet that we get over here, like I mentioned, I'm not in Mexico City. As we know, Mexico City is a very big place. And, the internet service over there is, I would say, much larger, much broader than where I am, which is a state that is, I would say, 50%, urban and 50% rural. So we're not, some, mega city or something like that. We do have internet and other cool things around here, but not in the same amount or quality as in, Mexico City. So what I do with my students is, I tell them beforehand what sort of things might happen with the internet. And I also, have, like I mentioned, synchronous and asynchronous, where they can, log on, they know the instructions, they can read them in case my audio goes out. All right, if something should happen, they can go to the Google Classroom, or they can look up the instructions that I give them in the WhatsApp group. And in that way, I have, a broader control of my learning environment for them. And, just in case anything happens, they know where to transition to. But, these things can definitely be avoided or improved with a broader internet, service and quality. I would say, as best as possible worldwide.
Thank you, David. That's a good reminder for us that we're working what's called US connecting broadband, but this is an international problem. It's not only going on here. So Bill, would you introduce yourself and tell us your story? You had quite a compelling story that you
Good
shared.
morning, afternoon, wherever you are, everyone. My name is Bill Stein. I am the Director of Technology for a small school district in Southern Indiana. I've been here 30 years. I think I just had my anniversary. So I've been around. When I started here, there was no internet. And about 27 years ago, I walked into one of our teachers' rooms and I said, hey, there's this thing called the internet. Now, granted, that was 27 years ago, but we still don't have students that have this access at home. And that is something that I'm very passionate about. So today I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to read you a story, a true story about one of our students, and her name is Lauren. I would like to tell you a story about one of our second graders, Lauren. Pre-pandemic, Lauren, with her long blonde hair and her smile on her face and a pink unicorn backpack, jumped into her dad's car every morning to head from their home in rural Posey County to her school, Mars Elementary. That's Mars with 2 R's. Her mom, Sarah, leaves a bit earlier in the morning as she is a kindergarten teacher at another school in our district, West Elementary. Lauren loves school and her grades show it. Life is good for little Lauren. But suddenly life changed in March of 2020 when in-person schooling was canceled. Her school, because of a lack of a reliable home internet in the area, had not ever done remote learning, but was forced into it by COVID-19. Lauren, like the rest of her students in her school, did not have an iPad issued to her, so her school was forced to send home packets of paper worksheets. Unfortunately, because of the chaos of the situation, many times the packets contained materials that she had already learned, but she completed them without much argument at first. Being a disconnected only child in lockdown isn't easy, and her parents started to notice that Lauren was developing signs of anxiety, which manifested itself with uncontrollable crying and increased anger. Soon, however, summer was in sight, and the hope that the end of the pandemic was just around the corner. It wasn't. Summer came to a swift end, and school was ready to start again. Would it even happen, Lauren remembers wondering? In-person schooling started as planned, only now things were different. Masks were required, there was plexiglass everywhere, and the smell of hand sanitizer was always in the air. Fortunately, her school spent all summer setting up new devices and training teachers how to use Google Apps, just in case an all-school quarantine hit again. However, she still didn't have internet access at home, so a Chromebook was pretty much useless to her. Little Lauren still rode to school with her dad, her pink unicorn backpack still in hand every day. But that ever-present smile was no longer shining bright. Lauren's mom and dad decided to seek professional help for her anxiety. A few months into the school year, Lauren awoke to find out her mom was now in quarantine, which meant she was too. It would be Lauren's first ever e-learning day. Recently, and thankfully, the school was now providing cellular hotspots through gear funding for internet and homework. Apparently, there was a Google Meet scheduled with her teacher that morning. Lauren got on her Chromebook and checked into Google Classroom. She remembered thinking it was still weird being able to access the internet at home. Since her mom was a teacher in quarantine, so were the rest of her kindergarten students, which meant they would all be online learning that day on one little hotspot. It did not go well, and Lauren continued to struggle with anxiety. This is Lauren's story, but it is not unique. While getting students connected at home is not a fix-all, especially for her anxiety, it is a start. And unfortunately, in our district, this same lack of access affects 27.8% of our student body. That equates to 557 of our students in Posey County who all share similar stories of digital inequity. So can you help me help Lauren and the other 556 students without internet access? Thank you for your time.
Wow. I have goosebumps. I mean, that's very, very powerful. And as you said, it's not just Lauren's story. There's so many Laurens out there. There are adult Laurens, there are higher ed students who are Laurens, and there are K-12 students. So thank you so much for sharing that story.
Wow, what a great way to kick things off with these three powerful stories. Today, we're gathered to figure out and make progress towards universal broadband access and digital equity. We're gathered around this question of how can we individually and collaboratively move concretely towards universal broadband access and access to the tools, the practices, and the resources and systems of support needed to flourish in learning and at work. This is a ShapingEDU live session. ShapingEDU is a community of dreamers and doers and drivers, including you, shaping the future under the auspices of Arizona State University. This is an open group of thousands of K-20 and lifelong learning educators, learners, technologists, leaders, workers, industry partners, all focused on creating better futures for living and for learning. And broadband access and digital equity is such a huge part of that. And of course, the part that we're focused on here today. The Connected for Work and Learning project, which is the project under ShapingEDU that is leading this webinar, emerged organically and really quickly last spring from conversations among community leaders who saw this need and wanted to be a part of the solutions. We're of course not the only group working on this, but we do hope to make a difference. Lisa, I will turn it back to you to share a few of the things we've been working on and kick us over to the next phase.
Yes. So just quickly, kind of a recap of everything, because as we said earlier today, we could go on for hours and hours because we've done so much. But quickly, so we meet every Tuesday afternoon. Anyone here is more than welcome to come and just listen in, even if you want to come in just once and just see what we're about. We'll send you the Zoom link for sure. So what we did first of all is we convened a group. And we call each other co-conspirators. It's just a group, a collaborative group. Everybody in the group has something to offer in a different way, which is wonderful. It's a very diverse group. One of our goals to help try to solve this problem is to develop relationships with other organizations that are working on the same thing, as well as individuals. And the individuals can be private company leaders or government officials or other individuals who've convened groups like ours who are interested. A lot of people in the library field have done a lot with this. So we reach out constantly to different individuals, and we've been lucky enough to have a lot of guests to kind of help us along with what our initiative is trying to achieve. We were super fortunate that we were able to invite the acting chairwoman today of the United States FCC to a meeting early in March, and she accepted our invitation, and that was just the highlight of our meetings. And so the reason why we're asking you your stories, and thank you to David and Alex and Bill, is that she told us the best way for me to bring your ideas to the Senate and Congress and all that and to make change is through your stories. And out of our meeting with her, she actually created a link for people to share stories on the FCC website. So we were thrilled about that. a second thing that we work on at the meetings, and that's come out of the meetings, is we have created an online course. And if you go to the ShapingEDU webpage, there is a link to the online course. Perhaps Laura can put that in the chat for you. And it's a course for anyone. It's a free course. It's going to have 5 modules. Right now, we've only posted up to the second module. 4 modules, I'm sorry, but we posted up to the second one. So you could start it and then more will come. And it's meant for those of us, like I heard Alex say, and David and Bill, we want to make change. So for somebody like you or me, how do I go about doing this? So the course it teaches you how you can do things to help make change, how you can contact your local officials, or what you can do to make change. Another thing we did is we drafted a template, an advocacy letter that you could just put the name of your local government official and send that off. So it's already written. We wrote it in one working session, which was a lot of fun. And the last thing is we are trying to collect as many stories as we can related to digital equity challenges. And we're going to be creating a nice storybook that we can also share out, and that we can share out with the FCC. So of course, there's so many discussions that go on and just interesting things at the meetings. But basically, it's all with the goal of creating universal broadband access, not only for K-12 students, but for higher ed students, as well as people who are in the workforce who need to connect to look for a job, or for the elderly who need to sign up for a COVID vaccine online. We reach, this is a huge umbrella over this initiative. So before we turn it over to the breakout room, if you'd like to type in any questions about what we're doing or who we are, I'll turn that over to you.
Okay, and while we're opening the floor to questions in the chat, Paul and Karina, would you like to give us a preview of what we're going to do here today?
Wild horses couldn't hold us back. The center of what we're doing here is emphasizing what Alex, David, and Bill have already showed us. If we're going to be successful in promoting broadband and really making that dream come to reality, it's going to be the stories that Lisa, Alex, David, William, Bill, and everybody else on this session is talking about. So what Karina and I are going to do in one of the breakout rooms is look at both how you tell your story textually in writing in plain English and how you tell it visually. Karina, as a fabulous graphic facilitator, as you're going to see during today's session, has some views on the graphic side of that. And I'm going to ask Karina to say a few words about that right now.
Sure. Hey, everyone. It's great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you for those stories. So maybe you feel like writing is your jam. That is the way you can tell stories. However, if that's not the case, if writing maybe doesn't flow for you or isn't exactly the way that you want to tell your story, we all know a picture can tell 1,000 words. So we're going to share some ways that you could use visuals either to build shared understanding as you're gaining traction around your story and sharing the same story across your team, or just simple ways to make sure that you're connecting with your audience in an effective way.
Fantastic. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and go into those breakout rooms in just a moment. We have 3 breakout rooms, and in the first one, it's all about crafting stories. You'll be working with Paul and Karina. The second one, you'll be working with Lisa and Brent to talk about transitioning from stories to solutions. And there's a third breakout room that is for the ASU Culture Weavers. If you choose, you have this additional space if you want to work together there. And these breakout rooms are open. So once I Once I open the rooms, you'll be able to choose which one you want to go into. And if you have trouble getting into one of the rooms, just throw it in the chat and I can move you to that room. In 2 of these, we'll be creating collaboratively designed resources. And so just a little legalese, we ask that you understand that by contributing to these resources, you're giving us permission to use your words in the resources that you're helping create. This will be Creative Commons licensed resources under the umbrella of ASU and ShapingEDU. So with that out of the way, let's have some fun. Let's tell some stories. Let's work on solutions. We're going to be in breakout rooms for about half an hour. The rooms are open now. Are there any questions or comments before we leave?
A quick one from me, Laura. Can you put the links to the documents into the chat for everybody to see? There's a document that Karina and I will be using for Breakout Room 1. There's a separate thing that Lisa and Brent are going to be using in Breakout 2.
I can put my link, right? I had it prepared. So there's Breakout 2. Okay.
Okay, and there's the other link. And your facilitators will also share the links again once you're in your breakout rooms. So with that, go ahead and choose your breakout rooms, hop on over into those rooms, and we'll see you back here in about half an hour. And again, if you have difficulty getting into a room, just throw it in the chat and I will help you find your way. Fantastic, welcome back. Looks like all of our breakout rooms are closed now. So glad to see everybody back. What we're going to do in the last half hour or so is share out. We're going to share the ideas that were discussed in each of the breakout rooms, some reflections and some next steps. So I suppose I will turn it over to Paul and Karina first. How was telling stories?
It was okay. It was fantastic. You should have seen the people in that group and the things they came up with. Karina's going to start us off with something that she introduced in there and highlight some of these where we'll have the participants in that session briefly describe their own work so you can see what came out of it.
So as you know, we talked about verbal storytelling and also visual storytelling. So I did a brief how to draw squiggle people because I found in personal experience and through research that if you draw even something as simple as this, people start to create that human connection and start to create a story around that humanoid. So at the top here, you can see this is the simple steps for how I like to draw people. And here's some ways that you can give them life and emotion. And that was another thing we talked about. Paul, are you feeling bold? Do you want to share that you gave it a whirl?
Well, I will just say that it's one thing to hear Karina talk about how to do this. You go, oh yeah, right. Somebody's telling me I can do that. I could never do that in a million years. So being skeptical while Karina was describing this, I had a piece of paper next to me and I started doing the little squiggle drawings and went, holy mother of God, look what I just did. It was such a great learning experience. I would encourage everybody on this to look at that 4-step thing she just did at the top there. If you got a piece of paper handy, do that in the next 30 seconds and realize how fast and easy that is to do. What a magnificent thing it adds to your storytelling ability to have somebody like Karina guide you through it and make the magic look so simple. Thanks, Karina.
It is. Everybody can draw. I'm a big proponent. So I'm going to jump to our slide and have our participants kind of share just a quick bit of what they created.
Hi, this one is mine, and I just remember reading about, I think in a few different areas of the nation where school buses became Wi-Fi hotspots in different areas. And so I, just grabbed some images to depict that and went with the title, Nothing Like the Comforts of Bus Learning, because I can't imagine that it's very conducive. Obviously, it gets the job done somewhat, but the question that I've put on there is, can we do better? So just telling that story in this slide.
Okay, so I had this, my inspiration for this story is a family that I work with, and I know how the mom with the 3 kids, they, as soon as the COVID hit and they were all stuck in the same house, so she had to rush and get computers for everybody. And of course, broadband was a real issue because, and it wasn't only the broadband, so they needed access. So nobody was actually hearing anything that the teacher was saying. At the same time, they were all in the same room, so one would interfere in the other. So she had to find a solution for headsets. The dad was having meetings in the other room, so he was trying to find the space. So it was a matter of so many things that happened to the family. So it's the pain is how the family had to quickly adapt to and rethink the spaces, and they're still struggling because the house wasn't made for that, for office and school all happening at the same time. So that's where I got my inspiration from my poor friend's pain.
Next, we had from David sharing his story, which you heard earlier. David, anything you want to add?
David, you're muted. We aren't able to hear you yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I'm still editing my slide. Well, I get the background. I don't know if you guys want to come back to me, or should I just go ahead?
Go ahead, because you're making a point here that's really important to the process we talked about. We went into that room with a half hour to work, and we made the point that this is an ongoing document that people have access to. So if you were to jump in later as a participant who wanted to add to that, you could, and we will incorporate that into the overall storybook we're putting together. David?
All right. So yes, my story is what I mentioned here. So my name is David. I'm an American English teacher now living in Mexico, and I used to live in Mexico City. So I did enjoy life and the culture there, and the benefits of living in a mega city. My family and I later moved to a small state, which is actually it's the smallest state in Mexico, kind of like Rhode Island to us Americans. It's the smallest state, and it's like about 2.5 hours away from Mexico City. So we do have internet, we do have museums here and so forth, but probably just not in the same amount as Mexico City. So the importance of having a broadband internet is that I do video sharing as well as having the cameras on. So all that requires a broader bandwidth. And if I could do this as well as you educators and teachers, if we can all do this with a higher quality of internet, it'll keep the students very well engaged. And if we do our job well enough with this tool, I mean, they could even forget that they're learning online for a moment, and just completely be immersed in the topic, be immersed in the curriculum, or what is being taught, and develop a sense of being proactive for them, where they can also take charge of their learning and ask questions, develop insight, and so on. So if we can have all of that and just like have it so vivid for them that they can, for just a couple of moments, forget about the quarantine, forget about pandemic, forget about that they're talking to a screen basically and not to me in person. If they can be so immersed that just slips their mind, I think we're doing a pretty good job.
Thank you so much, David, for your story earlier and for sharing your work in progress. Thank you.
Yes, thank you too.
Just a couple more.
And this is a story I'm sharing from Bonnie. We do a bi-weekly meeting we call Pandemic Problem Solving, in which we get together and just tell stories about how we're getting through things. And she was relating, she lives in the Four Corners area. And while some of the major urban areas do have internet access, most of the reservation is without internet and often without electricity as well. And so they have a number of students. She works in a residential school, and recently she had to drive basically 20 miles, and it took her 5 hours to deliver a flash drive with the content. And also I worked with a number of students on the reservation who are in the urban areas, and they have issues when the wind blows. with their internet going out. So that's kind of the two kind of points of this story.
Thank you so much, Chris. And last but certainly not least, I don't know whose story this is, but you're muted if you're speaking.
Oh, the mystery story. That one was clearly ghostwritten. Oh, sorry, Lisa. I know. I'm supposed to hold back on the bad jokes.
So you can see another great title, really engaging, and we've got some an outline work in progress. So thank you to our participants. We'll hand it off, I think, to the next group. Yeah.
All right. So we were solutions, and we had lots and lots of discussion going on. I'm just going to kind of sum it up. Really kind of sums up in one really brief sentence, or is we need, part of our solutions are we need to communicate, right? And keep that communication going at a local, a state, a federal, and now, because we have David, right, an international way, right? So, just because we get this solved here in the United States isn't going to be enough. That's definitely, that's part of it. And, it's bringing different groups together, right? It's not just our group. It's making sure we're connecting with, someone brought up an idea like with ADA coordinators, right? How can we make this as part of the ADA law, if possibly, right? So that's going to be brought up. We have other groups that are going out there and doing things. And part of that communication is, where do people go to find information, right? Is it all over the place? So do we need to create some type of website or something to say, hey, this is where you can go to apply for grants? Bill had shared that they have a website for their group, right? And then they applied for grants. Barnaby brought up a great point of not only, we've been working great with the FCC, but there's committees in the Senate and the House that are working directly on this. We need to also reach out to them, again, communicating to them, hearing from everybody and collecting these stories. I think that's really the big message out there. And
and I liked what Sabrina brought up, is that she's a school superintendent, and she said that they're working towards drawing in the people who are affected by this problem, because who better, like all of you, telling stories to help make change than those who are affected by the problem. So she said her school has the solution, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sabrina, maybe you can speak after me, of convening all these different people of her community to help make change.
Yes, it's a resource, not just for education work, but I mean, the entire community. Like you guys said with the vaccines, people couldn't even register to get vaccines or go get any type of information because they didn't know how to use the internet. So I think once we're opening schools back up, in which we are here in Alabama, we're going to see this need to educate people who don't know how to use the internet once they have it. Can you imagine not knowing how to use a phone or how to turn on a television? I mean, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about here. I get calls from parents all the time that don't know how to check their child's phone because they don't know how to work the device. Just those types of things that we all need to work on together.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I put a little thing in there, it's about that Barnaby also brought up, and others, it's not just the accessibility to broadband, but it's the affordability of it. It's the, hardware, and then how do you use it, right? All those 4 things that we need to find solutions for. So it's not just getting it out there. So thank you for bringing that up too. And I'll pass it off to group 3.
Wonderful. Culture weavers, I would love to invite you to share anything you wish to share with the whole group. I know you had a slightly different conversation, and if you wish, you are more than welcome to share some thoughts.
I can share just real briefly on behalf of the Culture Weavers, Culture Ripples group. We had some good storytelling of people's maybe personal experiences or things that had drawn them to universal broadband and speaking about this. We also had a couple of thoughts around potential areas we could continue to push forward. There was a program at ASU some years ago called Conexiones that did outreach around technology training with the student of migrant farm workers. And it looks like it's since kind of disbanded, but could have been a funding issue, a grant funding issue. So we were hypothesizing maybe we can explore working with the School of Transborder Studies and relaunch that program. So it's just a good conversation. I think. Anybody else, did I miss anything? Culture Weavers, Culture Ripples crew?
I didn't know if Bonnie were still on the call or not in the meeting. I think one of the other things that we were going to take away from UTO perspective is investigating with, I think, James McCabe, some of the things that are going on already and seeing how we might be able to contribute.
Love that. Building bridges between activists and change makers. Wonderful. Well, real quick, I want to talk a little bit about some next steps, at least from the Connecting for Work and Learning project team. And then, Lisa, I know this is putting you on the spot a little, but after we talk next steps, I know you had a couple more stories in your back pocket. I was wondering if you might be interested in sharing those as we wrap up. Okay, Lisa's muted, but I see enthusiastic nodding. So quickly, next steps. If you are interested in continuing these conversations, the project team would love to invite you to join the team. We have weekly calls Tuesday afternoons for most US time zones. And it's a group that changes from week to week. So we have dozens of people who are interested, and it's really a pop-in when you have the time and the energy. If you want, here's a link to sign up to join the project team. These meetings are very much interactive and conversation and active work driven. So we hope you'll join us there. The 2 resources that we were working on today remain open. So here's the link if you want to add or refine a story there. And here's the link to the resource that the Stories to Solution group is drafting. You're more than welcome to add your contributions and leave your name or not if you wish your contributions to be anonymous. And then, of course, there's the course if you wish to take the free online course. And we encourage you to share the stories that you created either today or create in the future on social media and elsewhere. For easy access, here are some of the hashtags and people that we've been tagging in our own work. So with all of that out of the way, let's get back to the stories, the heart of all of this. Lisa, over to you.
Okay, just a quick background about this. One of our regular Tuesday co-conspirators, Alice Keeler, she's very big in K-12 ed tech, and she has about in the 20,000s of followers. So she agreed to put out an email to her followers asking them to submit stories for us to share with the FCC. And as soon as she sent that out, it was on a Saturday morning that it hit, and my email because she gave my contact. So literally every 5 minutes I was getting another email. I mean, it was quite powerful. It was very emotional too, to go through all these emails. So I'll just read you some of them, of the 70 plus emails that the numbers keep growing and growing. But here's one. I love that you're doing this. At parent conferences, I spoke with a parent who was having difficulties hearing me. She took her phone to the bathroom to visit with me. Come to find out, the bathroom was the only room in the house that consistently had a decent, not good signal for cell phone conversation. We had just returned from a week of remote learning and her child hadn't turned in anything. So I was asking her about that. She explained that things were only able to be done by computer were hard for them to do. They have a hotspot, but the hotspot doesn't even connect all the time. Sometimes the only place it would work was in the bathroom. So this child had to sit in the bathroom and try to work when the hotspot would connect. Until we take care of all our children, we're going to continue to have huge gaps in achievement. And then this is in caps. No matter what the school does to try and help to even the playing field, without good internet access for everyone, everyone loses. And that was heart-wrenching to hear that in the United States of America, a student attending one of our public schools has to learn from the bathroom floor. I mean, that's pretty sad. And I guess I'll read one more just randomly. I don't know which one I'm going to get. There's so many of them. Let's see. The availability of broadband is a really very real problem in rural areas where a school system located in South Georgia, close to the Florida line. Our system, Lanier County Schools, is relatively small Title I system, and most of our students are from low-income homes and reside in rural areas. When our system had to do virtual teaching, Chromebooks were provided for students, but students didn't have internet access and they had to complete paper and pencil work with the teacher checking in via telephone. Thank goodness we've not had to do this too often, but our students do need access to broadband in order to have access to resources. Parents are willing to have broadband service if it's available to them. Another issue is that some can't even afford the broadband. Lack of broadband also impacts educators. My daughter recently built a house and her home falls in the gap between two internet providers. She had to get a Wi-Fi device from the cell phone company, and that leads to another problem. She didn't have enough data to stream to all of her devices. Thank you for taking on the project. Technology is here to stay as part of our educational system, and I'm hoping everyone can have access to broadband. And maybe just one more. Hello, I'm a teacher in rural Clay, Kentucky. At the end of last school year and periodically throughout the school year, we've gone remote due to the pandemic. Last year, we were prohibited to enter the school building, and my home internet just simply wouldn't support Zoom meetings with my class. This year, we're allowed in the building, so I was able to come to school and utilize internet here. But our area was just affected by a snow and ice storm that made traveling impossible for a few days. Since the weather was predicted, I prepared with a plan since I wouldn't be able to remote with students from home and travel to school could be dangerous. My girls and I packed up and stayed with my parents for nearly 2 weeks. The weather came in increments every few days. We've had multiple internet service providers come to help us, but we simply live too far out on a hilly terrain that interferes with signal. Had I not had the option of staying with my parents, I wouldn't have been able to adequately perform my duties. I know there are more stories like mine, and I'd love to have internet access available to all. And I have to say, there's 70 plus of these stories. I could go on and on and on, but as we've said, and as we know, I mean, electricity is ubiquitous. There was a day when not everybody in the United States had electricity. Now we do. Running water, telephone, postal service. So why not broadband?
And that raises the question, why not you? For a couple minutes here, let's do a lightning round before we give it to Karina to bring it all home. Question for all of you. And if you want to unmute yourself with a one-line answer, that would be lovely, or you can type it into the chat. The question is, what will you do in the next week or two as a result of having participated in today's session? Again, the action question for you, what will you do in the next week or two as a result of having participated in this session? Anybody?
I'm going to gather more stories from my colleagues in Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College.
Thank you so much, Jody.
Hey, Jody, I'm sorry. Oh, Jody, I was going to say, what are you going to do with them when you get them?
I'm going to invite them, my colleagues, to share in the slide deck and or ask me to share their stories in the slide deck. So excellent. I just, want to share their stories.
Great, we're getting some answers in the chat from April. I plan to take the Connecting Learners course. As Lisa mentioned, 2 of the 4 main modules are up along with an intro module, and we're just trying to blast through the last 2 modules to get those up as quickly as we can. Adero saying, get the word out to the ADA coordinators to gather stories from people with disabilities for our project. Jenny saying, send my letter of support for universal broadband in the US. Yes, yes, and yes. Carrie, maybe we can do a recap afterwards too, is what she's saying. Sabrina suggesting working with other leaders in my district to begin the process of building towers on our campuses. Last thoughts, anybody? What are you going to be doing?
And Alex, plan to communicate with community leaders. Thank you.
I would do a lot of what was mentioned here in the chat. Definitely really good ideas and suggestions. From my end, I will also just talk to my students, get some feedback from them, ask them how they're doing and how how the internet has been affecting them, whether high or low. Get that feedback from them, see how they feel. Could the quality be better? Can I go in a different direction? And also just get them intrinsically motivated to also talk to leaders, municipality leaders, townships, whatever is needed to just raise awareness and see what solutions are available, or if not, provoke them.
My final words before I pass this off to Karina. We have been doing blog pieces with people involved in broadband advocacy across the country, posting those on the ShapingEDU blog. The latest one, Gina Millsap out of Topeka, Shawnee. She is a retired library director, just recently retired, who's out there pushing for broadband as she has been for 10 or 20 years. And at the beginning of the interview, I asked her, so what title do you want to use here? She referred to herself as retired and then said, or until I get a better title, you could call me Broadband Avenger. And I want to encourage all of you to join Gina in being broadband Avengers out there. Karina?
Hey, thanks, Paul. Thanks, everyone. So here are my visual notes from our day so far. We've got these fabulous stories that we heard from Alex, David, and Bill at the beginning to sort of set the context and create some of those emotional connections. And then over on the right in the orange is some of the thoughts from your breakouts that you just shared. And so I think high level, what I'm noticing is that it's all about having a backup plan, having probably 3 or 4 backup plans, being flexible, and that takes energy, but really creating strategies, plans, and working to support these students, and also recognizing that learning isn't just a mental thing for students. Having access to broadband is really about their well-being, and students who find joy in school, if they don't have that, as we heard from Billa, can really affect their emotional growth and capacity. So thinking again about whole human and how we can create supportive environments for learning and beyond. And I just love what David said at the very end there of asking the students, and student voice is a really important part of ShapingEDU. So, we can have what we think are the best solutions ever. And in the Crafting Stories group, we talked about how touching base with your audience and figuring out what's important to them. So asking the students, finding out where they are, what they like, what they don't like, and how we can support them. Just love that. So thank you everyone for your critical thinking, your hearts and your minds, and for being a part of this conversation and action.
Wonderful. Thank you, Karina. Thank you, everyone. And with that, we will go ahead and conclude a couple minutes early and look forward to continuing the conversation and the work with you all. Onward.